Hi, everybody. For those of you I don't know, my name is Taylor Kirkland. I'm a modern work specialist here, servicing our providers and our payvider customers in the Midwest. I am based out of the Chicagoland area. And if you go to the next slide, Michael, we've got a jam-packed agenda for you all today. So we want to give you a thorough understanding of what is Copilot Chat and all the announcements that we made on January 15th, and what does it mean for our healthcare customers specifically? So today we'll dive into what it is, how to secure it, how to deploy it, and we'll do some demos throughout. The topics are going to be pretty 100 level, so would just encourage you to reach out to your account team to set up a deeper dive for any of the topics that may be top of mind for you. If we went deep in everything, we'd be here all day, and we only have an hour. So you may be curious, with all the updates Microsoft is pushing out around Copilot, what prompted the Copilot Chat? So I'll share a little behind the curtain info, but essentially, employees are craving AI to help them, keep up with their demanding workloads. As you all probably feel it, they're using AI in their personal lives to help me plan a trip, grocery shop, build a workout routine. It's not just Gen Z either. It really spans all generations. And over 70% of people admit to bringing some sort of AI into their work life too. And so we've heard, customers, you all are looking for a unified solution that can help meet some of these demands of your employees across your organization, being able to offer a consistent user experience in their flow of work with the standardized governance and controls in place too. I heard that you want a little bit more flexibility in purchasing options in deploying this type of technology. So think of Copilot Chat as a way to help you meet some of those demands that you may be getting from the business in a safe and secure way, allowing you, a little bit more flexibility in some of the pricing. So this webinar will be a success if you leave with a foundational understanding of what Copilot Chat is, and you're excited about the idea of Copilot Chat as a way to help you democratize access to AI within your organization. So with that, I will hand it over to Michael to kick us off.
Taylor. So I'm going to do a couple different introductions. So I'm Michael Goad. I am a CoPilot Technical Specialist here at Microsoft. So my job at Microsoft is help kind of break down some of these complex topics to help you understand how to leverage AI and talk about some of the technical side of that. And also with us, you're going to see some awesome presentations, but Nick Stillings is here as well. Nick, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, yeah, I'm a modern work usage architect, which is a really fancy way to say I just try to help users figure out how to use this stuff. So my charter is helping people, once it's enabled, get the most business value out of it. So I'll be dropping some links into the chat as we go. My favorite one is adoption.microsoft.com, which has training guides, one-pagers. A lot of the things that Michael's going to show us is actually covered there. So it's a great resource if you're in that kind of change management user adoption space. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Taylor.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. All right, so let's get into it. So one of the things that, if you follow Microsoft a lot or view any of our Ignite or follow any of our leadership, you'll often hear us say Copilot is a UI for AI. And it honestly took me a little bit to really understand this concept and what it means. And I think the easiest example I can give you is kind of imagine your smartphone and all of the applications on your smartphone. Your smartphone is Copilot. That's the kind of the mirror into all of your applications. And all of your applications are these agents. We're going to talk about what agents are and what they mean and where we're really seeing AI evolve into an agentic model. That's kind of the keywords there that are kind of we're seeing this year, but all of those applications are those individual agents, and those agents or applications do a variety of different things. You're maybe asking questions and getting answers back, or maybe some of these agents are doing things on your behalf. Maybe like a good example, like your Outlook is you're surfacing email automatically for you. So that's a really kind of simple example of like how we look at Copilot as a UI for AI, where it's your Copilot is that smartphone, and you're interacting with all of these applications or these agents on that device to do a variety of different tasks. And those can vary in a lot of different things. And where that really strategy comes into play is when we start looking at Microsoft Copilot Chat. So Copilot Chat is that strategy beyond there is to give AI to everyone, make it more a broader use case, because when it's important that users are going to use AI, and we want to do it in a secure manner. So what Microsoft Copilot Chat is, it gives access to all of those users the ability to use AI in a secured manner. And there's a couple different things that Copilot Chat can do. So one, it's grounded in the web. And when you hear the term grounding, it means that its knowledge base is based in a certain area. So right now, Copilot Chat is based in the web. So we can use, for example, utilize Copilot Chat to be able to prompt against the web, maybe do some research and so forth. And in addition to that, Copilot is then secured by something called enterprise data protection. So we're going to get into enterprise data protection and what that means a little bit later in the webinar. But we can also upload files. So if we want to be able to do things like summarize a piece of content or leverage a piece of content to influence another piece of content, we can do that. We can generate images and data visualizations. And we can also use Copilot Chat against agents. So agents is one of probably the bigger things that we're seeing right now as the next evolution of AI, where really view agents as those applications on your mobile device where they're built for very specific business processes and business workflows. So I'm going to go into a little bit later. I'm going to show you kind of a live demo of an HR agent that I built to kind of give you a little bit of creativity of how we can build agents and some of those and what we can do around there. But Copilot Chat users can utilize those agents. There's an asterisk there, depending on what that agent is accessing. There is a metered connection, so a pay-as-you-go model around some of that. And additionally, we have those IT controls. So Taylor mentioned that I think it was 70 or 80% of users are already using AI. One of the bigger things that we're starting to see is BYO AI. So back in my prior life, I helped a lot of organizations around BYOD, bring your own device, and how we manage that experience. Now we're having BYO AI, where we're having all of these users bring in their own AI. And that can cause a lot of problems, especially if we're having those users copy and paste data or attach files from our organizations into another AI that is not controlled. Copilot Chat allows us to bring a secured, controlled experience to all of our users to leverage and use AI, but make sure that we have security and control over the data that's being used. So to kind of help showcase what that really looks like, Nick, I would love for you to kind of show us a little bit of a demo of Copilot Chat.
Yeah, you bet. Here, let me share out my screen and let me know if you can see it here in a second.
I see it.
All right, awesome.
Thumbs up from the audience if you see it.
Thanks. All right, yeah. So here I've got, let's look at both of these together. So I'm logged into a demo environment as a user, and I'm looking at just the Microsoft 365 Copilot. So this is the full license, not just chat. And the biggest difference is this reasons over my work data. So I could say, please summarize. Oh, get nervous, everybody watching me type. And then put in a reference to a specific file. Something might be a file out in OneDrive or SharePoint or Microsoft Teams. And I could do any of the prompts that you've seen referenced, and I'll give you some resources where to find some of these prompts later, to ask it things like, hey, what's on my calendar this week? Help me prepare for the meeting with my boss that's coming up, or I need to compare two files. So that's the experience as a user who's got access to the full license for Copilot. But let me switch over to a user who just has access to the chat license. So they don't have the full access to Copilot. If I asked a question here, what's on my calendar this week, it would actually reply and say, I'm sorry, I don't have access to that information. But I can still interact with it from an AI perspective. We called out micro enterprise data protection. So this user, signed in, still has, because I can kind of tell that I'm signed in, I see that little shield, everything that I'm going to do still falls under EDP. So it's logged, it's security trimmed for certain phrases if I have sensitivity information, and I'm still assigned to my profile so I can do things like save my prompts and get back to them. They're just looking at the web instead of work data. So I think this is a great solution for shadow IT. And we'll talk about this in a little bit. If I don't give my users access to something like this, they're going to cut and paste work data into ChatGPT or another tool. I liken this to the, I think it was kind of like the consumer storage problem. Years ago, we tried to encourage people to put things in OneDrive, and they would put it in whatever file share they had instead. So we had to make sure we enabled OneDrive inside of Microsoft 365 and empowered it for people. So let's look at an example here. I can still use this for really relevant work scenarios. So I'm going to put in a prompt. I'm attending a conference next week on cranial and spinal therapy and pain management. I'd like a list of publications to review. Please prioritize those that have had clinical trials. And then I'd like a list of manufacturers who I might try to meet at a trade show expo. So this is going to be going out to the web. I'm using the same principles that I did with prompt engineering and Copilot. So I'm telling it what I'm doing, the results that I like, and how I like those presented to me. Let's go ahead and send it. And then while it's building, just like other prompts, I could save that. I could click View Prompts and go back to see them. And then let's assume I'm zoomed in so we can see the demo. Let's go up a little bit. It says, okay, exciting conference. Here's 3 publications I think you should do. Here's the top manufacturers in this space. And then just like everything in Copilot, I get a citation for everything that it finds. So at the end of each one of these, there's a little number that refers down to the bottom, and that has a link out to that specific thing it's referencing. So remember, it's Copilot, not Pilot. So even in Copilot Chat, I want to double check the work. This is how I can see that. And then if I realize, okay, that one on clinical studies, that sounds great. Let me go reference that. I can just click on it. It takes me right out to that page, and then be able to go through and see it. So there's an example of a clinician using Copilot Chat to reason over the web, but still doing it in the safe way underneath the auspices of my organization with enterprise data protection in place and avoiding that shadow IT concern. So, Michael, how's that?
I like it. I appreciate it. Taylor, any questions in the Q&A while we're switching prezos here?
Not yet.
Awesome. All right. So hopefully you're seeing my computer secrets, yay, nay. But I appreciate that, Nick. That's really helpful. And
thanks for the tribute. Yeah.
You see it?
Yeah. Now I'm going to put my performance review. I helped with the webinar.
Awesome. Love it.
All right. We see your screen up. Yep.
Cool. So around Copilot Chat, I think it's important to kind of call out, like, Copilot is really built into all of the applications and all of the experience where you want to leverage it. So what we saw from Nick was accessing Copilot directly through the web, but we've got a lot of other sources that we can view Copilot in. So we've got the Windows application, we've got it directly within the Edge browser sidebar, and we've got it soon enough coming in Teams and Outlooks, and kind of not, I would say, not unknown, but we also have it in the mobile app, and I think that's a really powerful way to use Copilot on the go. I've heard from other customers that they use it in various ways where they actually use the voice on the mobile app to interact with it directly. So really, what this is coming down is we have Copilot in all of the different experiences to make sure that you can leverage that assistant wherever you are. And to kind of summarize all of this, I think it's valuable to kind of understand what Copilot Chat does and what it does not. So what it does is it's grounded in the web. So we can do things like research and kind of the prompts that Nick showed us here, and we can utilize it as for agents. I'm going to get into agents really, really soon. But this is agents allow us to really build some very specific business processes and workflows that help us be 1% more productive each day, and then more importantly, those IT controls. So back to that kind of shadow IT or BYO AI. If we want to make sure that our users can use AI, but we want to make sure it's in a safe environment, Copilot Chat is a good way to do that. But what Copilot does not do is it's not grounded in the work data. So and when we say the work data, this is everything within your tenant. So, and we call it the graph. And what the graph is a combination of all your chats, all your meetings, all your transcriptions from meetings, all your OneDrive files. So it's able to reason over all of that data to help you around different things. And a good example of how I use work data with Copilot is every Monday I come in and I have a prompt saved in Copilot that I push out, and it looks over, and the prompt pretty much asks, what are some important priority things that happened last week that I need to make sure I pay attention to this week? What are some important emails I maybe have not gotten to last week? So it gives me a kind of a foundation to start my week, and I do that every Monday. So I find that super helpful. So it's not grounded in that work side of the data. And then more importantly, We can't use Copilot Chat in any of the M365 application experiences. So if we want to leverage Copilot, say in Outlook, there's a really cool feature. If you have a Copilot license, go and try this in the new Outlook, where you can open up Copilot in Outlook and say, schedule a one-on-one with this person, or schedule a group meeting with X, and X around this topic. Copilot will then automatically look at the schedules and schedule that out for you. Really, really cool. I actually started using that to book a lot of one-on-ones with my peers. But if we want to leverage Copilot in things like Outlook and PowerPoint and so forth, Copilot Chat won't be able to do that. So some of the kind of main differences between Copilot Chat and what a full M365 Copilot will do. And kind of like, this is a bit of an eyesore, but this kind of gives a good matrix of all the different features and capabilities between Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat and Microsoft 365 Copilot. It's a mouthful there, but the things that I'll point out here is the personal assistant. We're not able to access that in any of our M365 applications. And then we do have some additional management control. So we'll go over what SharePoint Advanced Management is. And there's some additional things in Copilot Analytics with the business impact reports and so forth that aren't available with Copilot Chat users. But what we will be sending this whole deck out as a PDF. So screen capture if you want, but you also get that as well. All right, off to Copilot agents. I said we talk about it, and agents are important, and it's where we're really seeing AI evolve to. And kind of going back to that example of the smartphone, the agents are those applications that are doing things on our behalf. And you'll see a lot of keywords like agentic AI and stuff like that. What that really means is just we're building out agents to do various things for us. So when we look at agents, they're built on kind of a couple different ways. We have retrieval agents, very simple agents. This is what we're used to interacting with Copilot now, where we're asking Copilot a question and it's giving us something back. But where we're starting to see the industry evolve is building out agents that do tasks as well as autonomous agents. So we're asking the Copilot to do something on our behalf and do that, all the way to autonomous agents, where a good example is maybe like we've got a shared inbox where our customers, our patients are emailing the shared inbox. We could have an agent that is reasoning over all of those emails and then sorting those to give to the right administration back office, claims processing, or whatever that may be. So kind of a simple example of how we could potentially see autonomous agents being used. But this is probably the biggest area that we're seeing kind of evolve when it comes to AI. And to kind of give you a good example of agents in work, I'm going to actually showcase. I built an HR agent. That's not the right user here. So let's go to Sally. So here I'm Sally. I'm actually in my Teams client. This is where we find most of our customers, where they're already using Teams to communicate and keep in touch, and Copilot's built directly within that. And I'm Sally here, and I've got a policy. My organization has built a policy benefits and policy assistant called Polly. And in here, let's refresh this. She's not working like she would.
Michael, would you also mind just bumping up your Zoom there in the browser too? That'll make it
absolutely
easier.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Nick.
All right, old eyes. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a 4K monitor, so I get it. I always have to think about that. All right, here we go. So I'm in the Copilot web app right now. It just needed a quick refresh. But let's say I think one of the challenges that I even personally faced when I joined Microsoft is, which is I'm about 6 months in. It's a lot. When you join a new organization, you got to reset your network, build out your network, and then more importantly, it can be challenging to really find some of the internal resources around benefits and policies, and even people that have been there a long time. Like, oh man, I forgot where I log in to do my enrollment for my insurance benefits. So we can build out a agent to be able to help with that. And in this instance, I find a lot of our customers will have all these policies and benefits in a lot of different areas. They may be on some SharePoint sites. They may be in ServiceNow as a knowledge base. So they could be in a lot of different spaces, which makes us very challenging for an end user to find this stuff. So what we can do when coming back to that Copilot as the UI for AI, we can take all of those various knowledge sources and combine them into a single experience for our users. And so maybe I'm coming in here and I want to understand what my parental leave is. And I built this agent with two different sources, a SharePoint site for all our HR stuff, and also a ServiceNow connector. So as you can see, that one didn't work as I planned here. Let's go to remote work here. So hopefully this works as I have it, but what you'll see here is it's going to look over our SharePoint database here. And there we go. So our remote work policy, right now it's picking up from that SharePoint database. So that's where that knowledge resource resides. So it's reasoning over that. So it tells the user what our remote work policy is. And then it also gives them a quick access to that document if they want to dive into that deeper. Additionally, maybe I'm a doctor and I need access to VPN because maybe Epic Rover's behind a VPN wall, or maybe on my desktop I need VPN to get to Epic or some information resource. I go in here Copilot and say, how do I access VPN? And it pulls it out, but you'll see it's a different location here. In this instance, it's pulling from our ServiceNow instance on how to configure VPN for Apple devices. So just a very simple use case here, but we can build agents to really be able to pull in multiple knowledge bases to make it really easy for our users to be able to find that information quickly, understand that information, and then follow through with that information. All right. But we know that when it comes to agents, it's a lot to take in. One, you're introducing AI as a whole, and then we're layering agents on top of that. It's a lot to kind of sometimes really understand how to fully deploy out here. So within Microsoft, we try to make that easy as well, where when we have out-of-the-box templates that organizations can utilize to be able to build out some of these agents for different things like self-help, IT help desk, and so forth. But Nick, I would really love your input on where you see some of this stuff and other things that, other talking points around this area.
Yeah, well, one of the best things I can use it for is to take that sort of implicit knowledge inside of an organization and make it more explicit. So I think, like we talked about prompts, and there's this concept of prompt engineering, for example, where I kind of refine what I'm asking for over time as I iterate through a series of prompts, give it a more specific and guidance, or tell it, hey, I want you to look at this, but kind of exclude these types of files. What agents allow me to do is, as a power user, as a lightweight citizen developer, I can go in and create an agent and preload it with some of those instructions. I can say, this is how I'd like you to present the information back to me. These are the sources I'd like you to use. These are starter prompts or suggestions I'd like you to give the user on things they could ask. So in that early example of the clinician who is going off to a conference, I could create an agent and call it the conference prep agent and point it to several sources like weather.com or the National Health System reference of clinical studies, and then put in some suggested prompts like, what is the weather in this city, or what should I review before the conference? And I kind of build up a little pre-event agent that I can then ask inside a Copilot chat and get those responses back. Imagine I'm working with clinicians. I'm going to make a generalization. This isn't always true, but I've noticed in my own experience, many doctors are incredible in domain-specific information. And sometimes when they step outside of that domain, they need a little help, right? So if I was going to set that up for them, that would be a great way to kind of pre-stage some of that information for them instead of having them come to me or a support person inside the department. This is an example. So there's an example, just guys, a simple external agent capability. Internally, things like being able to reference content sources that are connected to the Microsoft Graph or coming in from somewhere else. Maybe I've got an enterprise health record system that I want to be able to pull from and ask information. Maybe I'm a nurse on a floor, and somewhere in SharePoint, we have a library full of instruction manuals on how to troubleshoot some of the gear in my department. I can make an agent that just points to that. And that way in a urgent situation, maybe not necessarily urgent if I'm doing maintenance, but in a situation where time is limited, that nurse, he could open up Copilot on his phone, ask the agent a question, and get a response immediately without having to navigate through into SharePoint and open up a bunch of documents. So those are kind of what I'm seeing just right away, Michael, is kind of just easy, low-hanging fruit, even before we get into some of the ones that can automate business processes.
Yeah. Nick, you remind me of something. I was on one of our internal calls here at Microsoft, and I remember someone, I don't know if he was in IT or something, but he moved a role, and he found that everyone was kind of asking me, hey, how did you do this? How did you do this? And what he ended up doing was he created a whole bunch of knowledge bases and created an agent and said, this is how you do it. But in the future, go to this agent and ask that question. It's got all my knowledge and to do my previous job. So it's just kind of a fun story, especially if you got anybody in IT, you may be changing roles or something like that, creating an agent around all the knowledge base that you used to do, and there you go. You've got someone that can help other people in need. You kind of remind me of that scenario there, but I appreciate it. That's awesome, Nick. All right, so let's get into protections and IT control. So this is where we're getting into the IT side of things, and probably the biggest question I get is from an IT side of things, how do we manage access controls for Copilot agents as well as Copilot as a whole? So there's a couple different things that we can do here. So we can manage the experiences in a couple different areas. So the first one I'm going to start all the way on the far left here is the Power Platform Admin Center. So this is where you have controls to be able to govern permissions over who has access to what flows, what connectors, and so forth to be able to utilize in Copilot Studio and manage some of the sharing permissions there. So only certain people can utilize some of those connectors, like the ServiceNow connector and so forth, when developing agents and sharing those out. Additionally, in Microsoft 365 Admin Center, this is where we can start approving, denying, and blocking agents as they're being developed. So as we develop agents in AI Builder, which is creating an agent directly within the Copilot web app. So when you're in the Copilot web app, there's a little button that says Create an Agent. That's AI Agent Builder. That's a low-code approach to building an agent, as well as Copilot Studio, which is the kind of the tenant-wide way of building and more broadly building agents to be able to use for everyone. So within Microsoft 365 Admin Center, we can manage some of those agents there. So block and approve those agents, as well as look at things like the metadata of that agent. So as they get created, we can within the Admin Center, we can go and look at the metadata, which includes like things like the knowledge source and understanding what actions and stuff that agent can do. And then in the Teams Admin Center, this is where we can also approve those agents to be used within Teams as well as Copilot as a whole. So as those get developed in Copilot, they get published to Teams Admin Center, and then those team administrators can go in and approve and block those apps as well, and then manage which users can upload and use those custom apps. And SharePoint Advanced Management. This is going to reside on the SharePoint Admin Center. This is a tool that's been around for a little bit, but back in November at Ignite, it was announced that SharePoint Advanced Management would be an entitlement as part of your Copilot licenses. And SharePoint Advanced Management has some really cool stuff under it. So one, we didn't talk about SharePoint agents, but we can create agents directly on SharePoint sites. But this is where you can use SAM, is what we call SharePoint Advanced Management, to manage that. But the two big things that I think are really powerful with SAM is probably the one that gets most talked about, which is restricted site access. So this is kind of a heavy hand approach to be able to say, this specific SharePoint site is highly sensitive and I want to remove it from Copilot and remove it from Microsoft Search. And so I want to restrict it to only these users or these security groups. So we can utilize SharePoint Advanced Management to pick out up to 100 sites to pretty much restrict it from Copilot and all of that, and all of those intelligent search, and make sure that it's only accessible to the people that specifically we want access to. So really cool, especially if we've got some really highly sensitive SharePoint sites. And then also there's some really cool reports within SharePoint Advanced Management that allow us to really understand potential oversharing of content. So we can generate reports on content that's been shared externally, content that's been shared internally. Maybe we've got some documents that are got a little out in the wild and really should only be in the hands of certain people. So we can look at all of those different things and kind of understand potential oversharing. And then Sam gives us some tools to help remediate that as well. And then last but not least is Microsoft Purview. If you don't have Purview, I would really highly recommend looking into it, because when it comes to Copilot readiness and overall just Copilot deployment and managing your data and access governance, Purview has some really cool tools under its belt. One of the things that I see the most used out of Purview is things like sensitivity labels, which embeds metadata into documents that enforce certain things, like maybe certain users that certain security groups don't have access to certain documents with sensitivity labels in here. So it prevents users from accessing that. And there's some really cool audit controls where we can utilize Purview to be able to look at certain prompts that are being used within our tenant, look at shadow IT. So we can use Purview to be able to look at our users using other AI tools like Gemini, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, and so forth. So we can utilize Purview to kind of audit some of that as well. But Purview is actually a really cool tool when it comes down to chat security. And this is a really cool kind of visual of Purview in action where a user goes into Copilot and says, summarize this document. Copilot comes back and says, I see the document, but you're not allowed to access this document, so I can't do anything with here. So that's kind of Purview at work with things like sensitivity labels, where that user does not have rights to that, so Copilot can't do anything with that. So kind of a good visual of kind of Copilot at work. But when it comes to prompts, when it comes to kind of protecting the overall prompts and the answers and everything around that, Nick mentioned enterprise data protection, that kind of shield that he showcased in his demo there. And enterprise data protection, you'll hear called EDP, is important because it's secure and make sure that you have that security around your tenant, around all the data that's being used. And enterprise data protection gives you a couple different things. One, it makes sure that your data is secure. It's encrypted at rest and in transit. And also your data is private. A little, I wouldn't say it's unknown, but we at Microsoft, when we actually use a private instance of OpenAI. So all of your tenants have an individual private instance of OpenAI. And what that means is that data is private. It's yours. It's not, the LLM is not trained on anything that you utilize within all the prompts and so forth that you utilize within your tenant. And Microsoft doesn't see anything in that tenant as well. And additionally, EDP also means that Copilot respects all of your controls and policies. So all your permissions, your sensitivity labels, retention policies, and so forth are all respected. Kind of going back to that example with Purview saying, I can't do this because you don't have access to this file. And then finally, again, it's not trained on those models. So those prompts, those responses, any data that's accessed through that Microsoft graph is not used to train those models. But I think another area that I often get asked is, what about the prompts? And there's a lot of information on this slide. And where I want to draw your attention is the table over at the right. And I'm actually just going to read the prompt word for word and kind of explain some of the stuff that's going on. So in this example, we've got a prompt, and we're considering a possible acquisition of Fabricom. Help me put together a 200-word summary report of publicly available financial information on the company, including their business strategy. So right away, I know this prompt is web grounded. It's not asking for anything in our work side of things. But where I want to draw your attention to is the web query. So out of that prompt, when we send that over, Copilot is not taking that whole prompt and sending it to the LLM. What it's doing is it's taking keywords out of that. So in this case, it's taking Fabricom strategy and Fabricom financials, and then reasoning over that and giving that response back to the end user. So I think that's an important kind of factor when we're thinking about compliance and security and how our prompts are being used against web searches, Bing search service, and so forth, where we're not taking that whole prompt, we're taking pieces of that and then being able to reason over that. And to kind of take that to the next level, Nick kind of showed the cases a little bit, but there's link transparency in all of that. So once I put in my prompt, you'll see in the second box, we've got that transparency of this is at the link. So we can easily click on that link as an end user to go directly to that article to kind of review it and validate it, or we can view these links and kind of as a user say, this is a trusted site that I trust, so we're good here. But there's that link transparency for those end users to know where this information is coming from and the authority of that information. Taylor, any questions in the chat so far?
Yeah, it looks like Nick is managing most of them. I know Jeff just said
Yeah, frantically researching and pasting in links as we go. So yeah, there's a couple, Eric, I'm still double checking. I'll actually raise that or just comment on it really quick. Michael, Eric could ask for qualification on, hey, for something coming soon, like the capabilities in Teams and Outlook, what does soon mean? And so I try not to give a weasel answer, but we tend to speak in terms of quarters and months, just because you don't know what's, we do regression testing on everything. We may have to push something back from an engineering deadline. So the roadmap is authoritative in terms of when we're, our kind of our most broad public spec on it. But then also, it takes a few weeks for things to show up in each tenant. I always think of the Microsoft 365 Message Center. That is like the authoritative source for your actual environment. Would you correct me on any of that, Michael, or add anything to it?
Oh, I totally agree with you. And to give you an example, like what we talked about SharePoint Advanced Management, it was announced that you would get entitlement to that in January, but it started in January, but the rollout does not complete till March. So it takes time. I mean, there's a lot of tenants out there for that to log into all of the individual tenants. So I agree with you. That's a valid response, Nick.
Thanks.
Any others?
There were two more, if I could pick your brain. One was around enterprise data protection. What's that mean in terms of, you kind of touched on this a little bit, about Microsoft being able to see prompts, queries, and data. This kind of headed into sort of the lockbox question. And then for the system admins, right, the global administrator the Copilot administrator will be able to see it. For the latter, I can go into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center under settings that are Copilot settings, and there's I can't remember the exact nav path, I'll find it, drop it in, but there's a browse prompts link in there that will actually show me the prompts that have been listed that I can see with inside the tenant. I wanted to double check. I'm pretty darn sure we cannot see anything that you've put in from like a Microsoft data center administrator, unless you raise a support ticket, enable the Microsoft lockbox. There's a very long process to do that, to let us actually look at your data. I want to double check with you to make sure I say that accurately.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So we don't see anything unless a user submits feedback. So they can hit that down button on that prompt, and then they can fill out a feedback section. And within that feedback section, if you as the admin allow this, they can send that prompt over to Microsoft. But Microsoft's only going to see the prompt. It's not going to see everything around that. And it also doesn't see anything in that tenant data on there, just seeing the prompt. So that's one way they can see that if you submit that feedback. But you as an admin can also go into Purview, and you can audit those prompts as well if you wanted to. And also in Cloud Policy, so the M365 Apps Admin Center, you can also verify some of that feedback as well and submit feedback to Microsoft on a user's behalf and look at some of those prompts as well. So there's a couple different ways to do that, but Microsoft as a whole does not have visibility into that unless you explicitly give that to Microsoft through things like feedback.
Yeah. Robbie, did you have a question related to that? Do you want to come off mute? Or just drop it into chat if that's easier.
Last one sure was actually allowed mic. I might have turned off the mic, so that'd be me.
Sorry, that's right. Mic's a camera. Sorry, Robbie, we can't unmute you. Would you drop your question to chat, and I'll relay it?
Yes, I can actually post a question.
Oh, good. Okay. Oh, okay. If that's easier. Thanks, Taylor, for that control. Last area of the ones that have come up so far before we resume is around HIPAA compliance. And if I use Copilot Chat, is that HIPAA compliant? And Jeff gave some good context. I want to explain what's happening under the covers. When you enter one of these prompts, we turn it into a structured query, and then we send that against the Microsoft Graph. For a web-grounded prompt, so if I've got the full Copilot license or just Copilot Chat, we send that query out through Bing search. And it's still got some EDP controls over the top of us. We do things like anonymize the user, anonymize the tenant that it's coming from. But at that point, it does leave Microsoft's direct control. So that's what Jeff was referring to. Thanks, Jeff, for the explanation on that. From a HIPAA compliance perspective, is as soon as we kind of go out to the web and start, we're on the internet at that point. So we're outside of the controls that you have for your tenant for the content that's coming back. I have no way to keep, Clinic XYZ from publishing stuff they shouldn't somewhere, and that being exposed in a web search that Copilot can find. That's why we can't make it HIPAA compliant. Everything else is HIPAA compliant inside the Microsoft environment. I just can't guarantee if you go out to Bing or Google, if you're going to Google something, Google it with Bing, that the results coming back are going to be compliant.
Yeah, thanks, Nick, and thanks, Jeff. That's a really good explanation. I see a question: how easily this can integrate with our document repository in SharePoint and Confluence? Ravi, I need a little bit more context to this one.
So basically, if you are using Copilot, right? I mean,
Mhm.
intelligent search, and we have a documentations, right? I mean, SOPs and documentations and other things. If you want to integrate or if you want to index our documents and get the results effectively using the Copilot, is there a way that easily can do out of box, or do we need additional setup and additional things to do that?
Yeah, go ahead, Nick. Take a stab at it.
Are you going to talk about agents and SharePoint grounding?
Not in this webinar, but
okay.
If you want, yeah, go for it.
Yes, I'll briefly mention. So if I go create an agent inside of Copilot, I mentioned earlier I can point it over to SharePoint sites. So if I've got content that's inside of SharePoint, first of all, it's exposed to anybody who has access to that SharePoint site, including Copilot. So I could reason over across that document repository in SharePoint. Let's say, for example, I'm a clinician and I've got, I think I gave the early example, a folder full of maintenance documents, for the beds on my floor, right? I could reason over that. If that clinician doesn't have the full Copilot license, I could create an agent that just points to that folder, and then he's still able to get those responses. However, we do charge a small per message fee for each one of those. And I'll drop in a link on sort of how we think about calculating that. So Robbie, first answer is yes, you can absolutely point it to that repository. For Confluence, here, let me drop a link in. And this gets to there was another earlier question on kind of how graph connectors work. So Crystal, this is what I was referring to here as well too. The SharePoint administrator can go into the environment under search and say, hey, I want to hook you up to third-party data, Epic and EHR, Confluence, or some other resource that's out there, ServiceNow. And then when search happens, or when Copilot goes to ground a query, it goes out through that connector to that third-party data, finds the information it needs, brings it back, runs the responsible AI checks, and then presents it back to the user. So what we use is graph connectors, an API call for the Microsoft Graph to go out to a third-party service. I'm skipping details on like security and tokens and that kind of stuff. Pull the information back and present it. So coming all the way back to Ravi, that would actually be a single configuration you have to make inside a Microsoft Graph. The licensing for that connector is going to be dependent on the connector, the third party, and Microsoft, how we've set it up. The Microsoft 365 Copilot user with a full $30 retail user per month license will be able to just use it right out of the box. The Microsoft 365 chat user will only be able to use it with that metered agent access to it because they aren't able to see graph information, including connectors, with the chat only license. Sorry for the really long answer. I'm glad we're transcribing this.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll drop a couple of links to kind of cover what I just said. I'll go over a little bit slower. Thanks, Michael.
Sir.
Let's see. Are you coming up to deployment now? Yeah.
Yeah, Nick's our ninja link master here. So
I just have Bing open and a monitor next to me, so I'm not that smart.
I'll give a really good pro tip that I've learned when I was creating agents. Especially if you're going through testing, if you give 24 hours for SharePoint content to crawl, and to be added to the indexes to add it to the Microsoft Graph. So if you're building an agent and just toss a whole bunch of stuff into a SharePoint site and then start trying to prompt against it, you're probably not going to get the results you need because that data hasn't been pulled into the index yet. So just a pro tip: if you're building agents, and make sure you just give at least 8 hours, but I say 24 hours for that data to pull in there before you start really testing any of your prompts against any of that data. Just some stuff that I learned the hard way. All right, good stuff. I appreciate the questions. Keep them coming. So let's talk about managing agents at a tenant level. So this is where we're starting to get into Microsoft 365 applications. So I'm going to move into my CDX demo tenant here, and I'm in Microsoft Admin Center. And so if we want to manage agents, it's fairly easy to do that. So we can go to settings and then integrated applications, and then we can see all our deployed, available apps, blocked apps, requested apps. And then soon enough, there will be a shared apps over here. This is for all those agents that your users build an AI builder. So directly in the Copilot web app, you'll be able to start controlling those as well. But in this instance, I built a COVID-19 knowledge base agent, so I can click on that, and then directly in the admin center, I'll be able to, at the far right, let me blow this up a little bit here. I'll be able to update the app, remove the app, and other applications outside of this one. You can also block it. And I can also see details around that application. This is helpful for administrators being able to understand the capabilities of that agent as well as the knowledge of that agent. So what document libraries and so forth is that thing grounded in? And then any actions. This agent doesn't have any actions, but if we're using any kind of Power App Flow, ServiceNow connector plugins and so forth that may be able to write back to ServiceNow, for instance, those actions would show up here. And then I can also see the users. So I can, right now, this is deployed to my entire organization, but if I want to specify certain security groups that should have this, so I'm building specific business process agents for certain users, certain business units, that I can do that. And then where that comes into play is, maybe certain people have certain access to certain knowledge bases. So we're building agents that have knowledge bases that only certain people have access to. Then so we want to specify those groups and who can have access to those agents. And once we approve that, then we can go into the Teams application store, the app store, and we can search for those agents and install those directly into Copilot. All right. And then also within the Power Platform Admin Center, we have the ability to control sharing permissions and agent use cases with certain Power Platform flow. So, and a good example, maybe we've got an admin that's creating something for our financial team that has access to certain important financial data and content, and we don't want that agent to be shared, or that it's using some specific connections within the Power Platform that we want to make sure that aren't being used outside of certain people. We can go into Power Platform to be able to edit those permissions to make sure that only certain users have access to be able to share some of those assets. And then create a pay-as-you-go billing plan. So back to that Copilot Chat, if we are using agents, Nick gave some really great examples of some of those. As in order for a Copilot Chat user to be able to use an agent, the first thing we need to do is actually set up the tenant to be able to use for pay-as-you-go. So to do that, we can do that directly in the in the 365 Admin Center. In the Copilot section, there's a section there that you can hit, and then it's going to bring you directly to the Power Platform. I'll show you what that looks like here. So I'm in MS Admin right now, and I'm just going to go to the Copilot section here, and I'll go over to settings. Once I'm in settings, there's some really cool stuff that I recommend you kind of look at, but I'm going to hit this Copilot pay-as-you-go, a learning article if you want to learn more about it, but you can hit this link right here. This is going to open up Power Platform, the billing side of things. So once we're there, we can easily just select a new billing plan. So let me blow this up for everyone. Select Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat, give that a name, and then follow the rest of that. You'll need to make sure you have an Azure subscription and have permissions to view all of that, but just follow those prompts and you'll be able to create that pay-as-you-go billing and then source those agents to those specifically Copilot Chat users. Some pro tips here. Once you configure all of that, if you're we're going to stay in Power Platform. I'm going to go over the license section, and then I'm going to go over to Copilot Studio. So if we want to kind of monitor our pay-as-go messages and our consumption, we can do that directly within the Power Platform. This is just at a tenant-wide. This doesn't need deep into individual users. As well as one thing I would recommend going back, I'm going to go back to the M365 Admin Center. One of the things that I would recommend also looking at is there's under reports, there's this usage section as well. So you can click on that and then you can see usage for M365 Copilot Chat. I'm not using anything in the CDX tenant, but when your users start utilizing Copilot Chat, you'll be able to monitor some of that usage in addition to 365 Copilot. And then what we're not going to talk about, but there's some really good reports through things like Copilot Dashboard, which is part of Viva. And then there's some really good Power BI templates called Copilot Business Impact Report. So when you really start deploying Copilot Chat, you can utilize some of those more advanced reports to be able to understand adoption, usage, and so forth within your tenant. All right, it looks like we're good here. Any questions?
I'll add a quick comment because this is probably going to come up if I don't. This is relatively new. Under the covers, Copilot has a really high compute load. right? So that's why we're doing this kind of per message charging or these pay-as-you-go plans if people don't have the full Copilot license. So I tend to get a lot of, hey, how much is my agent going to cost? And the answer is it depends. We kind of don't know until it gets built and you try it out and see how many prompts people need to kind of reason over it. So I'm going to drop in a link to kind of how the pay-as-you-go pricing is kind of set up, and a link to one of our blog articles where we give some examples of sort of typical scenarios and kind of the charge within each one of them. It's in the cents, like dozens of cents per session, or maybe even less, depending on what you're doing. But our recommendation too is as we're trying to figure this out, this is a great way to build out pilot use cases, right? Create an agent for a group of users, pilot it with a small group, see what they use, measure the business value and impact on it, and that'll inform you if you should continue to do pay as you go, or if that population would benefit from the full Copilot license as well too. So it's a nice way, because it's such a new technology, to kind of determine the underlying business impact without making that commitment to the full license. Of course, we'd love you to commit to the full license. The three of us on the call have done it, and I can tell you we've lost weight, our relationships have improved, get more sleep, thanks to the benefit of the full Copilot license. But I'll drop a couple more links in on the pricing. And if you have more questions, drop them in chat. We probably won't be able to go too deep in them today, but we can follow up. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, I lost weight. I may disagree on that one. I think it's the opposite for me.
Results may vary. Results not typical.
So resources and support. Before I tap into that, like Taylor mentioned, if you want to dive into any of these more, so we're giving a lot of level 100 stuff here. If you set up time with your account team, maybe pick on Taylor as well. And, Taylor brings me in to have a lot of these conversations as well. So we can dive into a lot of these things. The billing stuff is usually one of the areas that a lot of our customers will have a lot of questions on. So we'll do best to help you there. But resources and support, there's a couple different things that I would recommend looking at. So we've got a really great scenario library that kind of helps you understand how to use Copilot in various scenarios. We've got a Copilot prompt gallery. So this is a collection of Copilot prompts to use in various different M365 apps, and the Copilot dashboard. So once you start really rolling out Copilot Chat, the dashboard and those other reports like the Business Intimate Pack report are going to be super valuable tools to kind of help understand adoption, usage, and kind of understanding how the voice of those users, and getting some surveys from them as well. And lastly, I'll hang on to this site for a second. So if you guys want to scan this, but there's Nick mentioned the adoption site. So if you go to adoption.microsoft.com, really great resources. There's some awesome PowerPoints for IT management controls, some awesome templates for sending out emails to users for education and so forth. I'm actually going to go through that site really quickly with some of the time that we have. So let me go to adoption.microsoft.com. And in here, I would recommend going to this Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. Hit that. And then you've got a lot of great resources in here. I found a lot of value out of new IT Pro resources. So if you hit there's some IT admin guides and so forth. I actually pulled some of the slides from that deck itself. So hit this site up, spend some time there, some really good resources there. But with that, I'm going to open up to some remaining Q&A that we've got for the next seven or so minutes. So I'm going to stop sharing, and people are welcome to come off mute or put it in the chat, but I'll answer questions here. Taylor, we got anything?
Charlia said, we enabled the Adoption Hub in Teams a few years ago as recommended by our Microsoft support team. If I'm understanding correctly regarding agents, the chatbot present in the Adoption Hub would work with Copilot Chat, or should it be replaced with Copilot Chat and new agents?
Charlay, I hope I got that right. I don't know the answer to that one. Nick, you got any thoughts on that one?
Oh, I got to look that up. Sorry, Charlotte, you stumped us. Yeah, let me double check, because I know that was used in its own bot for a while with a search thing behind it. Yeah, give me a second. I'll drop a reply into chat here. And then,
Joel, hello.
Yeah, Joel had that question earlier. If we want to go into that a little deeper.
All right, I've heard concerns about EDP. I wonder if it's possible for Microsoft Port or backend teams to access prompts. Can you speak to that? from the knowledge, from the education I've been giving is no, our Microsoft Teams do not have access to your prompts unless you specifically give access to the prompts for things like feedback. Joel, let me double check on that. Just give you 100% confidence in there, but that is the education I have. Good question. Taylor, could you, we'll probably use Copilot to figure out what action items we have for any questions. So
Yeah.
that probably sounds like good thing to do.
How do we use Copilot without making Copilot Studio or Graph available to unauthorized users?
How do we use Copilot without making Copilot Studio Graph available to unauthorized use? Joseph, give me some context. Like what I need a little bit more context to understand how to answer that one. If you want to come off mute, that's fine. Or hit me up as you can hopefully find my info. You can hit me up directly in Teams. But I think I need a little more context to make sure I can answer that correctly for you.
I just allowed him to come off the mic if you want. Or did there?
All right. So in our organization, one of the things that we're doing is we are rolling out Copilots. I'm in the planning, but we do not want users to start creating chatbots all over the place. We want only authorized users to do that. So my question is, can we turn off Copilot Studio, Copilot Graph, and all those things to kind of put some restrictions in terms of security, so that only authorized users can be able to create those bots, because you don't want to see bots all over the place in the organization.
Yeah, Nick, I'll take a stab at it. Stab at it if you've got any additional feedback there. So from a Copilot Studio, yes, you can put some restrictions on who can access Copilot Studio, because you do need licenses and stuff like that as well. And that's where some of that blocking certain flows and stuff like that. So your Power Platform administration controls come there. So from Copilot Studio, yes. From a Copilot, from the AI agent builder, this is going to get where it's going to get a little bit more complicated. So that's where individual users with a full Copilot license can create agents directly within AI builder. Within Microsoft Admin, you'll be able to soon see those agents that are created in AI builder and monitor those, as well as block and approve them. But right now, there's not a lot of controls on the AI agent builder side, and that's sort of by design, because with AI, we want to allow users to get creative and build things to help them be productive as well. Like a good example of how I built some stuff in AI Builder, I built my own text agent. So like sometimes Copilot, the language that it use, I use it a lot to rewrite emails, so I sound a lot better than what I do. So I sometimes there's weird jargon, so I created an agent to rewrite stuff in my own voice. So I use the AI agent builder to do that. So, but Nick, I would love your input and feedback there as well.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So I decided my next career, I'm going to be a Latin teacher, some body of knowledge that doesn't change, right? Because you hear the Microsoft people going, I think this is right. Have we changed it? Since last time I read it. So we will have a policy coming that'll be enabled in the policy center underneath Copilot settings to control agent creation. But as Michael referenced, it's not turned on yet. I'm going to double check that, and I'll drop a message in the chat if I can confirm it. And I'm still looking up the other one too. The other thing I just want to call out, kind of a little bit of an editorial, because we have a couple of services that are dependent on each other to make everything work inside of Copilot. One has to navigate between the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, the Power Platform Admin Center, and SharePoint, depending on if you're restricting access to some of the data inside of SharePoint. So as you're thinking about what your AI team looks like, we have a reference up on that adoption.microsoft.com site under the technical enablement guide of what roles should be on it, like what administrators. Recommend you follow that, just so you've got the right stakeholders, at the drawing board when you initially set it up, and you don't realize, shoot, we got to go off and find, Jim, who's the Power Platform administrator and is out, on vacation. So that's just that will get better. That's just sort of a typical Microsoft thing where we kind of release the user capabilities first and then slowly refine the admin capabilities. I'll look up the other question.
And then Claire, I see your kind of follow up to Joel. So I will look into that. I don't know that for 100%. And the question for the audience is, I've heard that prompts that are flagged for unsafe content, Microsoft employees could read those prompts. I don't know that for sure. So I will have to look that up. So Taylor, if you just can make a note for Joel, Claire, we'll look into that one. Just copy and paste those questions there, and I'll have to follow up with that. Good questions, though. Appreciate it. Stump the trainer
Do you
here.
have the registration report for the event? We could use that to drop these into a follow-up email.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, why don't we plan on that? I know I always hate coming to these things where the presenter's like, good question, we'll get back to you. You never hear from them again. So we'll huddle after this to find those. Like I'm pretty darn sure I don't know about the unsafe. Yeah, I'm going to double check that, make sure that doesn't go to some different team at Microsoft that's reviewing safety and AI or something.
All right, I'm reading Matt's last question here before we'll I know we're at time. So Matt, I know we're at time, so I'll try to reach out to you personally to just address this question you have here around personal copilots and stuff like that. But appreciate the question here. But with that said, I appreciate everyone and respect everyone's time because I'm sure everyone's got busy calendars here. But thank you for joining our webinar here. I hope it was helpful in kind of understanding Copilot Chat agents and going over some of the permissions and security controls in here. So with that said, thank you again. Thank you, Nick, Taylor, and Helen for also helping us manage chat and helping us address questions here. But I hope everyone has an awesome rest of the week and enjoys the weekend. With that, thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Eric.